Maddie here. This week we are talking about the book that has one of the longest, most ridiculous titles ever, but I still say it the full title every single time because I feel like you don't know what I'm talking about unless you say the full title. And that is The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Mary Ann Shaffer and Annie Barrows. Barrows. I don't know. Like we've been doing with recent videos, we are going to read the synopsis of the book, which isn't on the back of this book. We're going to read the synopsis of the book before I go into it. That way I don't feel like I have to explain the premise of the book as I'm talking about it. For those of you who don't know, this was actually my first full post on my blog. My first post was for Cindy and the Prince, and it was also like a get to know me. This is what I'm doing. This is why I'm here. But here's like a mini review. This was my first full review as posted on my blog, which will be linked down below. Now for the summary. I wonder how the books got to Guernsey. Perhaps there's some sort of secret homing instinct in books that brings them to their perfect readers. January 1946. London is emerging from the shadow of the Second World War, and the writer Juliet Ashton is looking for her next book subject. Who could imagine that she would find it in a letter from a man she's never met, a native of the island of Guernsey, who has come across her name written inside a book by Charles Lamb. As Juliet and her new correspondent exchange letters, Juliet is drawn into the world of this man and his friends, and what a wonderfully eccentric world it is. The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, born as a spur-of-the-moment alibi when its members were discovered breaking curfew by the Germans occupying their island, boasts a charming, funny, deeply human cast of characters, from pig farmers to, good lord, phrenologists, literature lovers all. Juliet begins a remarkable correspondence with the Society's members, learning about their island, their taste in books, and the impact the recent German occupation has had on their lives. Captivated by their stories, she sets sail for Guernsey, and what she finds will change her forever. Written with warmth and humor as a series of letters, this novel is a celebration of the written word in all its guises and of finding connection in the most surprising ways. Couple of things before I go in. First, I'm wearing the 50th anniversary Texas Renaissance Festival shirt because I just went this last weekend and it was awesome sauce. The back has a really cool dragon on it, and it also reminds me of the Tolkien kind of symbol. Second, I tried to film a video about this book. I think it was the beginning of this year, might have been the beginning of last year, like really early on, and I just cried through the whole thing. So, because the last time I read this book, which was last week, I didn't cry. I'm hoping we can get through this video without crying, hopefully. Third, I wanted to talk about it because I wanted to give it its real chance of being talked about because it's such an amazing book. But I found a book holder that I added to my belt for Ren Fair. So I actually carried this book around with me all day. Not a single person asked me, but except for maybe people that I went with, but nobody else asked me about it, but that's okay. It was still really cool just like having my book on my belt. So let's talk about this lovely book. As you can see, it is not a very big book. I don't know which blog it was or which video it was because I rewatched some of my videos a couple weeks ago. But I talk about one of my main goals for both my blog and now my videos is to make books more accessible. Because I know for a lot of people after high school, maybe college, they just haven't read because they were reading books because they had to for assignments and now they don't have to, so they don't think there's anything. Either they aren't interested in books at all or they don't know where to start, so they just don't try. So the goal of these videos and books and conversations is to make books accessible, to make them not so scary, for help you find your next read, the thing that will maybe get you into reading or back into reading or whatever that may look like for you. Now, I use this book as a good kind of entry for a myriad of reasons. While it is a fictional book, it is about very real historical events. The island of Guernsey actually exists. The island of Guernsey was actually occupied by the Germans in World War II. So while every single person in this book is fictional, the events that they live through aren't necessarily fictional. That can kind of help get you in because it's not so far into like fantasy fiction, whatever, but it's something you can maybe like, oh, like I know where England is. I know what World War II is. Things like that can maybe make it a little bit more accessible. It's also not super long. It has really, really good characters. It has great world building, an awesome plot, and it has something for everybody. It is a very healing book for the characters themselves as they kind of relive the occupation and like how they got through it, because that's how this society was formed. And it's partially that, but also just partially there's some really funny, interesting people in this book that deserve to be read about. You deserve to read their letters because they're hilarious and fantastic. I don't know, a couple of reasons why I'm talking about this book, why it's a good book, why you should read it. So the main character, Juliet Ashton, she, during World War II, wrote a comic. I think it was a comic or short stories or something for a paper in England to kind of boost people's spirits, to kind of be comedic relief almost. And they get put into one whole book, and that's how she kind of makes her start as an author. And she's looking for her next book because she wants to write something serious, and she wants to write, a true story. And it starts with she gets a proposal from the London Times. Throughout most of the book, they just call it the Times. And being in America, I think of the New York Times. It's not the New York Times, it's the London Times newspaper. She has been asked to write one of 3 pieces for a set of articles that are about the power of books and the power of reading and what they can do for people. And so she happens to get a letter from a farmer on Guernsey who has one of her books that she sold when she was, down on her luck, had no money. And he's like, hey, I have this book of yours that I love, and I'm hoping that maybe you can help me find another book of his. And that's how this whole thing starts. And he says I don't want to say funny, but he says some things in his first letter that she's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not a normal sentence. And so through that, she begins her correspondence with him, and they start writing back and forth. And through these letters with Dawsey, she uses the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society as her subject. She has to kind of gain the trust of the members of the society. And so Dawsey initially asked some people to write to her, and one of the main people, Amelia, she's kind of almost like the matriarch of the society, and she doesn't trust her at first. And I love what Juliet does. She has a woman write to her and a man write to her. And the woman is somebody that she volunteered with during the war that can't stand her. She cannot stand Juliet. And she asks her to write a character reference for her. And then she writes her childhood pastor who knew her parents and knew her growing up. She writes him to write a character reference for her. So someone who loves her and someone who hates her. She has them both write to Amelia so that Amelia can get a full picture of her character. And I'm like, that is kind of brilliant, honestly. It totally could have backfired, but for the sake of this book, it was pretty brilliant. And so Amelia and Isola and Eben and all of them start writing to her and telling her stories about their time during the occupation and the creation of this society. And from there, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. She starts getting letters from people all over the island. There's one from an animal lover and, somebody who has a cookbook and all these different things. There are some people who are reoccurring characters that they write multiple letters. And then there are some people where it's they just wrote this one letter and that's all you get, but it's to help give you a bigger picture of the occupation, or maybe of some of the characters in the story, some specific maybe stories within the story sort of thing. And it's so well written and so well done. And that's something I absolutely adore about this book and the way that it's written, being written entirely in letters, is that you get so many different perspectives, but they're all very important. There isn't a single letter that you get to it and you're like, literally why? This was why would you include that? Even if they're not a kind of one-to-one of showing you the importance of the society or books or whatever, they're giving you a bigger picture of the island during the occupation, which is specifically what she's writing about. And ultimately what she ends up writing a book about is the society and the occupation at this island and what it had to go through. And so it's so cool getting all these different perspectives from all these different people. Like I said, there's an animal lover and there's somebody who wrote a cookbook. And of course, everyone in the society hated her because all she did was read from her cookbook when they're living off of turnips and potatoes with no seasoning. Of course, they're going to hate you. And just kind of things like that. And it's so beautiful and so well done. And I love this full picture you get of the island and what it went through, because these characters are fictional. The events they went through aren't. These things really happened. And that's what's so beautiful about this book, is you get this picture of history through the lens of people that, like I said, they're fictional, so they didn't actually experience it, but from people who really experienced it. I don't know if that makes sense or if that just sounds really dumb. And so I really love this book. I love the way that's written. I love the story that it tells because it's so beautiful, so powerful. Like I said, she's writing about the power of books and the hope they can bring, the community that they can bring, that even different perspectives they can bring into your life by maybe reading about things that you don't agree with or don't like, or maybe things you didn't think about at all. And so this book just does such a good job of doing exactly what it sets out to do, and that it's showing you how powerful books can be, how powerful community can be, how powerful hope can be in the darkest of times. It shows you all those things, and I feel like it does a really good job. That's why I recommend it, because it's a good book. It's a good book. It's a good book. It's a good book. And I think everybody should read it because, like I said, it's got a good entry back into books, or maybe entry into books to begin with, but it also is very real, very true, very raw, very a lot of things. It makes you feel a lot of things, but it's all so good and so worth it. So I highly recommend. I absolutely love it. I love the characters. I love the story. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Kind of other thing I wanted to say is this book does have a Netflix movie by the same name with Lily James, who we love, playing Miss Juliet Ashton. And I kind of need to go through, I do have a blog on this also, but I kind of need to quickly go through the differences and kind of pros and cons of it. It's a good movie, but if you're wanting the book, that's not what you're going to get. And for a couple of reasons. For me, the biggest kind of hurdle is this book is told entirely in letters. So for about the first third of the book, she's just corresponding with people on the island and other friends and such, but it's mainly about her correspondence with people on the island. And by the time she gets to the island, about a third of the way through the book, they already love her and trust her and want her there. So they're very excited for this event to happen. In the movie, she only corresponds a couple of times with Dawsey before she just shows up on the island, and they don't trust her yet. And so it was very much a ask for forgiveness, not permission sort of situation. And so that's a really, really big difference. And while I understand why they did that, because a movie would be boring if you spent the first third of it just having people writing back and forth to each other, it doesn't build their relationships as well, because you have these people that in the book, by the time they meet her, they love and respect her. In the movie, they're like kind of side-eyeing her and being like, can we trust you? Can we really tell you our story? And they don't get what they get in the book in terms of like the character references, and they're not given a reason to trust her besides her kind of just butting herself into their situation in the movie. And we still like love Juliet and all those things, but it's not the same in terms of the way she goes about meeting everybody and getting to know everybody. That's the first big thing. The second big thing is the love interest. So in both the book and the movie, she has a love interest of an American named Mark Reynolds. In the book, he is a newspaperman. He owns newspapers in the state. In the movie, he's in the military, and neither one of those is bad things, but it deeply affects her relationship with him, because in the book, you know, her friend and editor is like, don't let him steal you away, and she's like, no, don't worry about it. And he likes that she's accomplished, she's smart, she's, you know, well read. He likes all these things about her, and he just wants her essentially as arm candy to make himself look better. And in the movie, it's definitely more of a he just loves her and just wants to be with her. And what's so difficult is that in the book, it is like so obvious he's wrong for her. Like it's an easy no, we don't want this. In the movie, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like Juliet's a little eccentric, and she's got, you know, kind of big feelings and big thoughts, and Mark is very grounding for her. He can kind of bring her around, kind of back to safety almost. And so in the movie, like, it was hard not to root for Mark. And that's really difficult because she doesn't end up with him. She ends up with Dawsey, which is the plan all along. And it's obvious in both the book and the movie that's the plan all along. And in the book, it's like, oh yeah, of course you want to be with Dawsey. He's like awesome. And in the movie, he is also great. But it's hard when Mark is also very great. And the difficult thing with Dawsey's character is that he's very, you know, kind of quiet, kind of reserved, you know, soft-spoken. And in movies, it's very hard to combat that, to see anything other than just quiet, reserved, soft-spoken. It's hard to see maybe the sway that they have, the respect that they have, all those really cool things. And you understand all of that in this book. They specifically talk about how Dawsey never asks for anything for himself. So if he asks you to do something, you're always doing it because you know it's for the betterment of others. Because like I said, he never asks for anything for himself. So while both characters are great, the book, you just get a much better picture as to why Dawsey is a good balance to Juliet. And in the movie, he's just a sweet, quiet person. And it's a little bit hard to get more than that in the movie. Those are kind of the biggest things. There's also other things like you just get a better picture of Kit in the book than you do in the movies. There's side stories with like Isola that happen in the book that don't happen in the movies. They give you a better picture of Isola, and she's hilarious. And the kind of final it's big, but not big. Elizabeth, who is Kit's mother and the founder of the society, she is kind of the main character of the island's story. And in the movie, you still find out her full story through Mark because he's military, so he has connections. And then like kind of abruptly, story is pretty, I don't know, it's not as well smoothly unfolding from there. It's pretty like not staggered, but like stunted almost. And in the book, you get a good full picture of like healing and understanding, realization, all those things. You get a much better picture in the book, and you get it through a friend of Elizabeth's. You find out what happened to her and all those things through this friend so there's a much better picture in terms of healing and knowing just like what the heck is going on and how they're going to continue forward from this event. So the book just does that way better than the movie does. I know the movie is short, so it can only do so much, but it's hard to, when you get so much more with the book. It's hard to like, I don't know, the movie, it's fine, but it's not the book. The book is definitely better, and I totally recommend it if that isn't already obvious. So I hope you'll read this book. But with all of that, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you have a great night, a great week, great weekend, great month, great year. I hope you have all the greats because you're truly worthy and deserving of them. So until next time, 再见。